1,000 Ways to Make Adobo, a dish called Dynamite, and the world's oldest Chinatown. This week, we're in Manila, Philippines.
Traveling the world to bring you delicious dishes, tasty beverages, and interesting experiences. This is the Destination Eat Drink Podcast on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
I'm Brent Peterson. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink, the travel podcast for foodies. This is where we try the world's great cuisine here on the Destination Eat Drink podcast and also on the Destination Eat Drink YouTube channel and at destinationeatdrink.com. My guest this week is Jian Tayaban from Explore Manila Tours at exploremanilatours.com. And we'll try some wonderful Filipino dishes. But first, do me a favor and share the podcast with your friends and social media. It helps more foodie travelers just like you find the show. And if you really like the podcast, consider supporting us with a one-time or recurring contribution at buymeacoffee.com/destinationeatdrink. And thank you very, very much. Jian Tayaban is the founder of Explore Manila Tours. He takes visitors all over his city to explore its neighborhoods and taste some terrific food. We talk about all kinds of Filipino cuisine, including pastelillos made from buffalo milk, a sweet whose name could get you in trouble, and why Spam is so popular in the Philippines. Jian also tells me why tofu isn't always vegan in the Philippines and how Filipino cuisine started to assert itself worldwide. Okay, I'm starving, so let's eat.
Destination Eat Drink.
Jian from Explore Manila Tours. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink. Looking forward to talking Manila and food with you today.
Hello, Brent. Yeah, great to be here.
Jian, you're from Manila, and, I think a lot of Americans, that's most of our audience here, haven't been to the Philippines. So what can you tell us about Manila, your city? What makes you love it so much, and what makes it special in your mind?
When the average American thinks about Asia, two countries come to mind, Thailand and Japan for the most part. But I always tell people, if you're from an English-speaking country, the Philippines really is the place to go to in Asia because you still get that wild, different culture. But in terms of language barriers, there's none because everyone understands English here. Manila in particular, I've lived here now for 17 years. I moved here when I was fresh out of university. My favorite description of Manila from one of my guests in the past was, after New York, Manila is probably the next most international in terms of cuisine.
Oh.
There's also another saying about Manila, wherein outside of Italy and the US, the next best place you can find great pasta, especially in Asia, is in Manila.
I do love pasta, and I'd like to talk.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk to you about the cuisine of Manila. But first, I want to ask you about this because you have a slogan at Explore Manila Tours, which is, trying to help visitors overcome this mindset of skip Manila, go to the beach. And I don't know, do a lot of people, is that a problem? Is that an issue? A lot of people are just like, Manila's just our landing point, then we're going to venture off to the beach. And if that is an issue, how do you help people overcome that?
Yes, definitely that's an issue. Like if you start researching about the Philippines right now, planning a trip here, for the most part, many of the articles that you'll find about the Philippines will say that you should skip Manila, just land there and then get a flight out immediately. While yes, it's a very big mega city. It is actually, the thing with Manila is it's 16 different cities all cobbled together. So we locals know it as Metro Manila, but it's actually 16 different cities. Of the 50 densest cities in the world, all 16 of those are within those top 50 densest cities.
Oh, wow.
So yes, traffic is bad. Yes, there's pollution and all that, but it's the center of a country. So a lot of the culture, a lot of the heritage, it's all within here. And one of the ways that we've started to change that mindset is by offering experiences here in the city, which hopefully makes people think twice about leaving Manila too early. Like spend maybe 2 3 days. Everything from all sorts of different food tours, like the oldest Chinatown in the world officially is in Manila, so we have a food tour there. We have what they call those street food tour in Manila as well, which is a great introduction, so that when you're in the islands, you kind of get an idea already of what like how to go about eating and ordering street food in the various islands. Most recently, we just launched wherein you'll get to have lunch at a local's home. Uh, I met this old couple. It's a grandma and grandpa, and they're just basically kids have flown the coop.
Hmm.
The what they call that, the grandkids don't visit enough, right? Because they're busy with school and all that. So I told them, hey, you want to host random people for lunch? And they were like, oh yeah, that sounds so much fun. Because think about it, Brent, the best food comes from grandmas, right?
Of course. Always the best from grandma. And they're like, yeah, we've got different grandkids visiting us every day now. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, so it's activities like that. We've seen it within the last decade or so. More and more people are deciding to spend a couple days in Manila, get their bearings, learn a little bit about the history, the culture, and the food of the people.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the food and, and the culture as well. And you mentioned your street
Mm-hmm.
food tour. So let's start there, the street food tour, because I love street food. What do we expect when we go to Manila? What kinds of street food will we see there?
Taking a cue from our exact menu, basically it's 18 different things. So the way we've curated it is we go to a non-touristic neighborhood. Like the moment we meet up there, look around, like it's like no tourists are in the entire area. It's more like a collection of neighborhoods. We chose that particular neighborhood primarily because, like I said, there's no tourists there, so all the restaurants there, all the little street stalls, their main clientele are locals. So that's how you get a taste of local cuisine. Now, another way that we curated our street food experience is chose we jokingly say 1/3 is adventurous, 1/3 is just tasty regular treats, and then the other third is just sweets. So the more adventurous part, you'll have some, let's say, offcuts, parts of animals that you normally would not eat in the West, like let's say pig ears, intestines, pig intestine, chicken intestine, all sorts of little goodies that the way we present it to you is they grill it on skewers, so they look like little like uh kebabs of sorts, and then I won't tell you what it is until you've actually taken a bite, and then so judge it first on the flavor, the texture, before you judge it by what it is actually made out of. And for the most part, I'd say 99% of our guests, they're like, huh, it's not half bad. Like I wouldn't consider eating it if I had known what it was, but since it was just a blind taste test, they were like, "Yeah, it's pretty tasty."
Nice. And what is the just delicious one? So you said you break it into three categories. The adventurous. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what you surprise the people with. And then what's the second part?
Yeah. So the second part, we have like everything from steamed dumplings. We have deep fried vegetable spring rolls. We have this very interesting like dish known as kwek kwek, which is boiled quail eggs, deshelled and then covered in a light batter and then deep fried with a gravy. That's nice as well. And then deep fried like pork and tofu. And there's this one dish which is a big hit among many of our travelers. We call it dynamite. Basically, it's a local green chili stuffed with kind of like pork hash, like our version of pork hash called sisig, and then wrapped in a rice paper wrapper and then deep fried. I jokingly say it's like our version of the jalapeno popper, but
Right.
more Filipino.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's called dynamite because the pepper's spicy, I assume.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, it's not always spicy. I jokingly say it's something like a roulette. Most of them are just mild, but am I allowed to curse in this podcast?
Sure.
Yeah, but one of them will be a son of a bitch, and it's just gonna get ya.
Yeah, so that's like the padron peppers in Spain. They keep saying, well, 1 out of 20 of them is spicy, and frankly, I've been eating padrones for 20 years, and I've never had a spicy one. But I guess I missed the bullet in the chamber every single time. Um,
Lucky you.
yeah, lucky me, I guess, right? You
Yeah.
mentioned you mentioned the spring rolls, and those are do I have the pronunciation of this right?
Uh-huh.
Lumpia, lumpia, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell
Yes, correct, correct.
So, what would the filling be in these spring rolls? What would we typically get?
So lumpia is the Filipino word for anything that might remind you of either a spring roll or an egg roll. For the most part, they're deep fried and crispy and tasty, but you'll also get non-deep fried versions, so they'll be soft, more like a burrito of sorts. The general rule for lumpia is just look at it. If it's roughly the size of a finger, it's probably gonna be all meat, more often than not a combination of either pork or beef, sometimes chicken. And then if it's bigger than a finger, or let's say like 2 to 3 fingers big in diameter, it's generally a mixture of vegetables. So it could be everything from like sliced up green beans sauteed with onions, garlic, and other spices. It could be all sorts of different vegetable goodies. I've had versions that had heart of palm. If you have any listeners from any of the southern states, I believe you call it swamp cabbage. Like when you kill off like a palm tree and dig at the very center of the trunk, it's kind of like a vegetable. So we have those types of lumpia as well.
So you mentioned vegetable lumpia, and you also mentioned earlier tofu. So I have to assume that for vegetarians that it's pretty friendly there.
No, it is not.
Oh, okay.
It is a well, it's getting better nowadays just because we've started to get more international travelers within the last 10, 15 years. So, especially in the hottest islands where people really want to go, you'll see a lot of this younger generation that are vegan or vegetarian. So they're starting to get more options. But historically, the Philippines and most of Asia, I would say, is a little bit tough for vegans or vegetarians. Now, funny that you mentioned tofu. So, I was scrolling in Reddit a couple months back, and I came upon this post, and this one guy was in the U.S., and it was like he was in a potluck, and he was asking if he was psycho, but the guy was Asian American, and he had brought in a tofu dish, and then there was a Muslim classmate that was asking, "Hey, is this halal?" And the Asian American said, "Oh, no, 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 this has pork in it. You shouldn't eat it." And then they had another friend who was basically classic American white vegan girl, freaked out because she had eaten the dish, and she started to get mad that tofu is supposed to be vegan. But the whole point of this entire story is for Asia, tofu is not a vegan dish. Tofu is like hamburger helper. You
Oh.
put tofu with actual meat. It's an extender. So once in Asia, especially here in the Philippines, if you see a tofu dish, you should not assume that it's vegan or vegetarian.
Good advice. Ask first. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So you said that you've got the oldest Chinatown in Manila, and I assume that
Mhm.
lumpia is probably part of that culture in Chinatown. But
Mhm.
you guys do a dim sum tour that's focused specifically on Chinatown. Tell me a little bit about that because everyone loves dim sum.
Yeah, so we did a little bit of a play with our dim sum tour. The thing is in Cantonese, dim sum literally means snack. It's not just those steamed little bite-sized morsels. It's basically anything that you would have as a snack. So I wanted to play on the meaning a little bit. So our tour in Chinatown, all the foods that you eat, it's over 10 different items, is all what we locals would consider snack foods. But there's a thing about Filipino culture wherein anything without rice historically was considered a snack. So a funny story I always share to my guests is I remember because my mom would love to try out different recipes from all over the world. And there was this one time she would cook spaghetti and meatballs for dinner, and my dad would eat it with a side of rice. because he wouldn't consider it a meal without rice. Yeah, he would eat a pepperoni pizza with rice
Oh my
as
goodness.
well. Yeah. It's
That
not as strict anymore. A lot of the younger generation definitely can get full with like pizza. For the Western mind, they'd be like, "Hey, this is already enough for a meal. Like, what's this? This is it's not a snack anymore, Gian."
I think your father would get along very well in Portugal. I was just talking with my friend Lorraine about this. One of the things that we noticed moving here to Portugal
Mm-hmm.
from North America is every plate has potatoes, usually French fries, and rice.
Mm-hmm.
And in the US, you would
Mm.
never get both of those together because they're both considered starches, and you wouldn't want those
Mm-hmm.
together. But here in Portugal, it is extremely common. Like any traditional
Mm-hmm.
restaurant you go to, the plate of the day will almost always have French fries and rice on it. So I think your dad would like that.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So, what else in Chinatown should we look for besides all this great dim sum that we're going to be enjoying? Because it sounds like a very fascinating place, this Chinatown in Manila. Anything else we should be on the lookout for?
So aside from the steamed dumplings that you'd be familiar with, there's all sorts of different noodle soups. There's all sorts of different bakeries as well. I think the Asia in general gets a reputation of very sweet bread. Very much so here in the Philippines as well. When we were under the Spanish rule, for the better part of what almost 400 years, one of the main produce that they made us grow was a lot of sugarcane. So one of the positives that you could say that came out about it was everyone had access to sugar. So we put sugar in so many things. So we have so many sweet treats, great sweet pastries all over Chinatown.
So, would one of those be either the puto, Puto, or the suman? Because I read about both of those treats and they sounded delicious.
Wait, funny thing. So, cavite for all your Spanish listeners or anyone who understands a little bit of Spanish. So, puto in Spanish, I don't know if you know this, Brent, is a very bad word.
Uh oh.
Like if you call someone that in LA, you get shot, basically.
Oh, okay. I know enough.
Yeah.
I know enough Italian to figure out what that probably means. So I
But
didn't even put that together, and I should have before I opened my
but
mouth.
yeah. But funny enough, in the Philippines, the puto, which usually you would use for males, actually literally means a fluffy rice cake. It was never a bad word here in the Philippines. Now, puto and what's that? The other dish that you mentioned,
Suman.
tuman. Yeah. So these are different variations of uh, a bigger classification of Filipino sweets known as kakanin. So kakanin is a variety of rice-based cakes. Some of them are sticky and sweet. Some of them are smooth and sticky. Some of them are fluffy, kind of like, let's say, cornbread. Puto is actually very much like a cornbread. You can eat it as is, or historically here in the Philippines, we pair it with savory dishes as well, like how you would eat cornbread with southern U.S. barbecue. So yeah, they're part of the kakanin classifications, and there's over I dare say over 1,000 variations of kakanin from all the different islands of the Philippines.
What's your favorite sweet? Maybe from Chinatown or maybe not.
Mm, from Chinatown, they're really famous for hopia. Hopia, how do I begin to describe it? It's a very dense and chewy, sweet pastry, historically stuffed with sweetened mung bean. But we also it also comes in red bean. It also comes in ube, which is the purple sweet potato, which is the Philippines is slowly getting famous for, and all sorts of different things. I've had like a hopia that's I just remembered. It could be akin to like a nice brownie in terms of like texture in the mouth and all that. So that's my favorite in Chinatown. In the Philippines in general, it depends on the mood, I would say. I think the average Filipino would always say halo halo, which is one of our most colorful and famous Filipino sweets. But personally, for me, pastillas is one of my hands down favorite Filipino sweets. So think of it kind of like cheese curds, but much, much more creamy. And the thing is, unfortunately, nowadays you will see pastillas made from regular cow's milk, which is yucky, to put it bluntly.
Okay.
The version that I'm just absolutely enthralled with is made from buffalo milk. And there's a big difference between regular cow milk and buffalo milk, because buffalo milk is higher in fat content, so it
Yes.
comes out creamy and delicious and tasty, while the cow milk version comes out kind of like a cheese dipped in sugar, which is, while still good, not as good as the creamy buffalo milk one. So definitely pastillas made from buffalo milk, or carabao milk as we call the water buffaloes here in the Philippines. Something people should keep an eye on.
I would love to try that. That sounds divine. You mentioned the abe, and this is getting very popular in the last few years. I think social media has a lot to do with it
Yep, yep, yep.
because it's so colorful and vibrant on your screen because of that
Mm-hmm,
because of that purple color. And
mm-hmm.
I've seen it made into different kinds of treats. The abe itself, it's a
Ube,
relative of
ube,
ube. Sorry, of
ube.
the sweet potato, right? So one thing I've seen has been the ube ice cream, but how else is it prepared? Are there other ways that it's served?
Historically, the most common way that it was prepared was known as ube halaya. Now, if I am remembering it correctly, it's halaya comes from a Spanish word that kind of means jam. So you would get the ube, you would cook it down with coconut milk and a ton of sugar and maybe a little bit of cow milk or buffalo milk, and you just make it as smooth as possible, like the smoothest purple mashed potato you can imagine, but sweet and creamy. And you just put them, you either put them in jars or you shape them kinda into like a loaf, and people would just eat it as is, like a nice little um uh, smooth, chewy snack. And that was historically how we would eat it. Now, that was a very common treat during the Christmas season. And generally, it was only prepared in the Christmas season because it was such a lot of work. Nowadays, just from that halaya, that jam like consistency, you can put it in so many things. You could stuff it into croissants, you can mix it with ice cream mix, you can pipe it into all sorts of different pastries, you could mix it with like halo halo and all sorts of different dishes. That's how you see ube used nowadays. It's especially within the last 10, 15 years, I've seen people get so creative with that base ube jam.
It looks divine, and
Mm-hmm.
it's delicious too. So you got that bonus going for you. I did want to
Mm-hmm.
ask you about a specific dish because you've been talking about the Spanish influence quite a bit. As you said,
Uh-huh.
they ruled Philippines for 400 years or so. But there's I think it's a soup called arroz caldo, which is like
Ah,
a rice broth of some kind. Which I'm not familiar with. So, what can you tell me about that?
arroz caldo is basically kind of like a congee. If you've had a Chinese congee, that's basically what arroz caldo is. It's creamy. It's almost like a little bit more watery. What's that Italian rice dish? Risotto. It's like a little bit more watery risotto. Now, arroz caldo generally means it's with chicken, but there are other versions of it. It has a ginger in it. It has crispy fried garlic in it, and then you can have it with either chicken or beef entrails. Is one of my favorite. It's pretty tasty. Uh, I've had it in this one tiny little shack somewhere in the northern part of the Philippines, wherein they put corned beef in it, which was pretty nice. But basically, it's a nice, homey comfort food. Your mom would usually make it during the rainy season because it would warm you up, and then it had ginger, so it would help you uh, like fight back against the sniffles and the cough and colds and all that.
Now, we've talked about the Chinese influence, we've talked about the Spanish influence. Of course, the United States was there, as you
Mm-hmm.
know, militarily during World War II. And as I talk to people around the world where the U.S. military was stationed during World War II, inevitably the idea of spam comes up because the GIs they didn't care for Spam, and they give it to the locals, and the locals, like when we lived in Hawaii, the locals loved Spam. The native Hawaiians, they love Spam. So I'm wondering, specifically Spam, but anything else that maybe was a U.S. influence that came to the Philippines as far as cuisine goes.
Well, spam, absolutely, we love it. I mean, it's a bit pricey in terms of local price points. People when people have like family that live in the U.S., one of the main things that they always ask to send back historically was always cans of spam.
Hmm.
Now, the thing with spam, like with YouTube and all the social media nowadays, I see a lot of young Americans. They'll make a video. I'm gonna try spam, and they open it up and they plunk it on the plate, and then they get a fork and they just stab it and take a bite of it, and they say, "Ew, it's disgusting," and all that. And I tell, like, the way to enjoy spam is you're supposed to cook it still, even though it's already edible from the can. So kind of think of it like it's like a canned bacon. That's how I would always call spam. You pan sear it a little bit, or maybe grill it sometimes, add a little bit of smoke flavor. Spam is absolutely a big favorite here in the Philippines. Um, One way we love to eat spam here is just a couple slices of spam fried in oil, and then served with garlic fried rice and sunny side up egg, and that's a wonderful breakfast or a hangover cure at midnight here in the Philippines. Other American influences in terms of like cuisine, I just found out about this a couple years back, but apparently after the US, the next highest per capita consumption of peanut butter is the Philippines.
Oh,
Yeah, so I grew up with peanut butter sandwiches. I mean, I remember when times were a little bit tougher because I was the eldest of four kids. When I was starting to form a mind of my own, I saw my parents who were still young in their career, so they weren't making that much money. A struggle meal that we had was local bread with peanut butter, which I can totally relate with a lot of the older generation in the U.S., wherein peanut butter was also a struggle meal. And many Filipinos historically we grew up with peanut butter. Uh, th- Basically, I found that peanut butter just made its way here in the Philippines post World War II, kind of as food aid, and it's been generally available everywhere here in the Philippines for the last what 80 years or so.
I love peanut butter, and it's not that easy to find it here in Portugal. We have to go quite a ways. We have to walk probably 30, 35 minutes to find decent peanut butter in our city, but there's one store that carries a
Uh-huh.
Trader Joe's brand of peanut butter, which is an American company. So we do it because the other peanut butter brands, the off brands that they get here, are not very good. So we're willing to walk 35 minutes to get our peanut butter fix going here in Portugal.
Yeah. So my funny you mentioned that. So speaking of Europe and peanut butter and all that, so I found out how hard it is, or how not common peanut butter is quite recently. Right before the pandemic, my parents were hosting this like 16-year-old from southern Italy, and she was an exchange student in our little small town. So it's way out of the city, but I got to meet her. I went home a couple times and met her and all that, and she was there with my younger sisters, and she was telling me that like one of her favorite things that she found here in the Philippines was peanut butter, and it was something she'd never seen growing up in Italy. So nowadays, like every Christmas since that one year she stayed with us, she would send home that Christmas cake thing from Italy that's covered in like powdered sugar type thing. So she'll send us a like a Christmas basket of sweets from Italy, and then we send back a Christmas basket of stuff from the Philippines, and it always contains peanut butter.
That is awesome because the Italians, they typically don't like peanut butter. It's
Oh.
here in Portugal they're kind of indifferent to it, But my
Uh-huh.
experience in Italy has been most, maybe it's changing with this younger generation, but most of the older Italians, they have a visceral disgust towards peanut butter. I don't know why. I don't know
Really?
where that came from, really, but that's been my experience. That might just be a limited sample size. But anyway.
Oh.
So maybe you ask her about that. Ask her what her parents think and what her grandparents thought about peanut butter. You might learn something, and maybe I'm wrong. I'm not sure. Let me ask you, Gian, about a couple other dishes, and one is Philippine adobo. This is a
Mm.
very, very popular dish, and when dishes get this popular, people have strong opinions about different ways of preparing it. How about you? What do you feel
Mhm.
about Filipina adobo?
So yes, it's like the poster child of Filipino cuisine nowadays. The main ingredients for adobo historically was the garlic and the vinegar. So most versions nowadays will also have soy sauce, but for me the main for adobo, or a good adobo at least, is soy sauce, a lot of fried garlic, uh, an acid, generally any form of vinegar. We have so many types of vinegar here in the Philippines. If there's a sweet fruit or sweet natural something, you can make vinegar out of it, or liquor, which we have a lot of as well, vinegars and liquors. Um, Bay leaf and black pepper. Those are my and a sweetener. I like adobo with a sweet and savory combination. Now, the thing with adobo is, I jokingly say there's over 1,000 variations of adobo, just by changing a little bit of something from it. So, uh, just change the meat, for example. Off the top of my head, pork adobo, beef adobo, chicken adobo. I've had tuna adobo. I've had just weird animal adobo. For the longest time, I've always told my friends and family that if I ever were to make a YouTube video, I have a YouTube channel. I'd make one that says "Will it adobo," and I'd travel all over the world finding all the weird animals locally, like even in North America, elk, bison, squirrel, possum. Like, will it adobo? And it will probably will. That's the beauty of adobo. Whatever you can think of, you can cook it adobo style. And good news for our vegan and vegetarian friends, you can also adobo all sorts of different vegan options. Like tofu can be turned into adobo with no meat or animal products whatsoever. String bean adobo is a big favorite in many households here in the Philippines. Uh, like the tougher type vegetables, you could very much turn them into adobo. Potato adobo is another version I've seen around in many places. So changing a component of adobo creates already a variation, but then you can experiment more. I've seen versions wherein they add a little bit of coconut milk, so it adds a creaminess. Personally, my way to do pork adobo is I will add chunks of pineapple. That's a lovely combination as well. Some of the southern islands here in the Philippines, they'll add a ton of chilies in their adobo. Some places and they will use turmeric in their adobo, so it turns a little bit of different color, and the flavor profile gets enhanced a little bit. So yeah, I think the fact that adobo comes in so many forms, it can be reinterpreted in so many ways, is a great reflection of what the Philippines is, because we're made up of 7,000 plus islands, Brent. So there's probably an adobo for each island in the Philippines.
I love this idea that you can eat all these different adobo all these different ways and never have the same adobo twice. Is anyone doing trying to do like a high level, like a haute cuisine type adobo?
Leveled up Filipino cuisine, definitely. A lot of the younger generation chefs and restaurateurs, they're slowly starting to come about, especially here in the capital, in Manila. Um, Off the top of my head, Gallery by Shell or Toyo Eatery. There's one that opened quite recently. I have yet to try them, but I just recently started seeing them making the rounds on social media. But yeah, definitely, that's a thing with Filipino food. It's not it's not known worldwide. I want to digress a little bit. So now, I would argue there's three major diasporas in the world: the Chinese, the Indians, and the Filipinos. Historically, within the last 300 years. Now, the Chinese and the Indians, we can't beat them in sheer numbers, but in terms of percentages, we're probably within the top because around 12% of our total population is somewhere else in the world. Like there's Filipinos everywhere. Like think what they call that healthcare, Filipino nurses everywhere in the world, right? I don't know if you know this little fun fact. Might win you what they call that trivia competition one day. But did you know that almost half of all sailors in the world comes from the Philippines?
No.
So basically, yeah, basically take all cruise ships, oil tankers, and cargo ships on international water.
Wow.
45% of their crew comes from the Philippines.
Fascinating.
Yeah, there's Filipinos everywhere in the world. One of the main things about Filipinos is we adapt really well to new cultures. So while the Indians and the Chinese still wanted to eat their native dishes, so they set up a lot of their restaurants. Filipinos, when they got to a new place and it's steak and potatoes, the Filipinos were like, all right, we're gonna eat steak and potatoes now. If it's pizza and pasta, all right, we're gonna do pizza and pasta now. So it's Filipino cuisine has been flying under the radar for such a long time. It's only within the last 10, maybe 20 years that Filipino restaurants are starting to pop up all over the world, considering that there's so many Filipinos all around the world.
You know, that's such an interesting point, Gian, because last
Mm-hmm.
summer, a year ago, we were in Milan, Italy, and there's
Mm-hmm.
a huge Filipino population there. And they came in like the 1950s. And so I said, well, I'm going to look for a Filipino restaurant because I really want to try some Filipino food, something that I'm not super familiar with. And the fact of the matter was, there weren't a lot. There were a lot of Filipinos who were working in kitchens, but there weren't, I couldn't find them. Now, maybe, Milan's a big city and I didn't look everywhere, but I could not find a restaurant dedicated to Filipino cuisine other than fast food chicken places, which is not what I was looking for. Um, so what you're saying about this adapting, this very much rings true to me from our trip to Milan in Italy last year.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But yeah, hopefully now, culturally, we're experiencing a resurgence, pride with our cuisine, and slowly but surely through the internet, I'm starting to see that there's more and more Filipino-focused restaurants popping all over the world.
Well, send some over to Portugal because I'd love to. I'd love to try it.
The closest one I know, there's this little cafeteria type thing. Some YouTuber did it right before the pandemic, somewhere close to the Vatican. I know there's a there's a Filipino cafeteria, and then the dish that he tried there was known as crispy pata. If ever you find yourself in the Vatican in Rome, crispy pata is basically deep fried ham hocks. So crispy, crunchy, crackling on the outside, succulent, juicy pork in the inside. So definitely keep an eye out on that.
Will do. They'll be on our next trip to Rome. So one of the things that you talked about at the beginning of our conversation, Gian, was the
Uh-huh.
overcoming the skip Manila, go to the beach mindset. So hopefully during this conversation, we've convinced people to go to Manila. But when I make my trip to Manila, that's not going to be the only place that I go in the Philippines. I'm coming halfway around the world. I'm going to go to some other places. What do you recommend for folks to do after we've spent several days in Manila and after we've gone on the Explore Manila tours?
The main thing about the Philippines really is we're known for our beaches. So and one thing that I'll say about the ocean here in the Philippines is it's like when you're in the ocean, one of the major fears is sharks and stuff like that. Within the last 100 years, there's been less than 10 shark attacks everywhere in the Philippines. I think like the bigger sharks, like great whites and all that, I think the waters here are too warm. So generally, they don't stay here. So we have a lot of pristine white sand beaches. And for the most part, uh, not much wildlife that will ruin your vacation, so to speak. Some islands on the radar right now. El Nido and Coron are great. Coron, particularly if you dive, there's a lot of World War II era shipwrecks in the area. There's a thermocline dive there, where basically the deeper you go, Brent, I think it like if you're at the very bottom, it will be less than 100 feet. Uh, the temperature of the water will be like 120
Oh,
Fahrenheit. So yeah, so that's a pretty cool dive experience that you can do in Coron. El Nido is a lot of like great, beautiful, uh, tiny little abandoned islands that you'll visit for a day. Those are a great experience to do. Uh, Cebu is another island in the south. There is a major city there, which is also great for food. They're famous for lechon. They're crazy about lechon, which is whole roasted pig. So that's definitely something avid food travelers should keep an eye out on. But aside from that, Cebu Island is a fairly large island. It'll take like maybe 6 hours to go end to end. And parts of it where you'll be able to swim with whale sharks. Basically, they're the largest, if I'm not mistaken, largest fish in the world. They're not actually sharks. They're not actually whales. They're like a fish, so they breathe through water, and like huge. They're the size of like two yellow school buses.
oh,
So that's
wow.
a fun experience there. Yeah. And then they're gentle giants. They eat krill, like tiny little like shrimp type things. So I actually saw a guy get swallowed one time and got spat out because their throat is so tiny it can't swallow a full human.
Oh my God.
Uh,
Oh,
yeah, but that's that was another adventure altogether. That's you're not in danger of experiencing that if you do that in Cebu. Cebu is also famous for the canyoneering. Basically, you go through a river canyon that, and then it's just mostly like swimming and walking around in the river, and then you'll come upon an area, and then you'll have to jump. It starts at like 5 feet, and then 8 feet, and then 10 feet, and then I think the highest is like 18 foot jumps into like pools of water. So that's a pretty fun day activity as well. Siargao, within the last 5 years, has been very famous. The joke about Siargao is be careful if you visit Siargao because you might never leave. I've had people who have done tours with me in the city and then they tell me, "Oh, I'm going to Siargao." And I'm like, "Okay, be careful." And then 6 months later, we catch up on WhatsApp and they're like, "Oh, I'm still here in Siargao, Jian." Living the beach life and all that. So it's a surfer's paradise, I would say. There's islands like Bohol for the chocolate hills. And like I said, Brett, there's over 7,000 islands in the Philippines. And one thing I've seen within the last 10 years in the travel industry is every few years or so, this new island becomes like the hot new island internationally. Like people start to learn about it and people start coming. And yeah, like you can have like party islands, you can have like abandoned, like Robinson Crusoe type island wherein it's just you and a couple of coconut trees and stuff like that. Yeah, there's so many different great islands to check out here in the Philippines. I think within the last 20 years, an island of the Philippines has always made it in the top three best beach destinations in the world.
well, Gian from Explore Manila Tours, thank you so much for sharing your insight into not only Manila, but the rest of the Philippines. And hopefully, we've convinced folks to overcome the skip Manila, go to the beach mindset. Although, sounds like you're very much in favor of going to the beach in addition to going to Manila.
Yes.
This has been a great conversation, really fascinating, really making me hungry for some Filipino food. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Well, it's been fun. Like I mentioned on our earlier talks, Brent, I'm really passionate about our culture and gives me a chance to showcase Filipino culture and food, particularly, is something I'm always excited for.
That's Gian from Explore Manila Tours. You can reach him at exploremanilatours.com to find out more about Manila and his tours. Well, that's it for this week. Next week, we are in Lisbon, talking with award-winning TV host and cookbook author Maria Lawton. She tells me about a secret recipe from a dark time, and we have a pastel de nata debate. Don't miss that. Until then, get over to destinationeatdrink.com. I've got foodie travel content of all kinds, and I'm constantly posting new stuff. This week, for example, I just posted a brand new foodie travel guide to the city of Bilbao in the Basque region. These foodie travel guides have everything, all the dishes you need to try, all the places you need to try them, and all the cool things to do. It's not just about food, it's about traveling to the place as well. And if you're planning a trip to the Basque region or northern Spain in general, this is something that you should see, and it's free. You can get it at destinationeatdrink.com. and just click on the Spain destinations to find Bilbao. I also just posted a new video that's on the website. Click on the video tab at destinationeatdrink.com. This one is about the Arrábida Nature Park in Portugal. This video was a blast to make. We explored a cave with a shrine to a saint in it, had a beer on a terrace right over the water, and I clung for dear life on a cliff hundreds of feet above the beach. And we saw wild boars on the beach, too. How about that? You can see all of that by clicking on that video tab at destinationeatdrink.com. And if that weren't enough, I also have a Substack page. I just posted a story about all the different kinds of coffee in Portugal, and there's a lot of them. If you're interested in that, you can read it at destinationeatdrink.substack.com. Destination Eat Drink is distributed by the Radio Misfits Podcast Network and Ed Silla. Thanks, Ed. I'm Brent Peterson. I'll see you down the road.
Join us next week for another culinary adventure on Destination Eat Drink, a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.